Well, good day, people. Happy New Year. Hope everyone is well. It's one of those transitional days, saying goodbye to 2020 and saying hello to 2021. And got me thinking a little bit about a sort of tension here. And I see if I can think about this a little bit. But it's, and I think anybody who's followed my channel for a while, you know that I always have an interest in things that are ambiguous or where you have these kind of different tensions or again sort of irresolvable ambiguities. And I've been thinking about one lately about this sort of tension between substitutability and non-interchangeability, that we're to some extent or other more or less substitutable, and things are more or less substitutable, and also things are more or less or to some extent just non-interchangeable. Now, I guess one way to start it would be to say that, when you look around the world, especially the industrial world, that's, the world of manufacturing, where you have things like the number two yellow pencil. You're writing for a little while with your, number two yellow pencil, and it breaks or you lose it, and you can go get another one. And there's a substitute for it. And we, without losing too much sleep over it, we say, well, you lost that pencil, just go grab another pencil. And, the notion of clothing and clothing sizes, it's fairly modern. It's fairly new, that throughout most of history, anything that you wore was either personally tailor made for you, again, very rare, or was a hand me down and sort of just, restitched and refitted to fit for you. The notion of a 34 long, or this notion of just going into a store and buying something off the rack for anyone of your size, it's fairly modern. And I guess the moral of that story is that in some way each of us we're kind of substitutable with every other person. The doors are made with certain sizes of people in mind. Chairs, there's all kinds of furniture that's made. It's not made for you absolutely singularly in your non-replaceability. It's made for anyone, which means for everyone or kind of no one in particular. And so, substitutability is really the name of the game when you're dealing with like functional anonymity, right? And I think it's hard to register some of this, because I think we do want to stress that each and every one of us is absolutely unique. We're singular. We're irreplaceable. We're just not substitutable with one another. And yet there's another sense in which all of us are in some ways replaceable, that life will roll on with us and without us. I think you see it sometimes with like the captain of a football team. The captain of the football team has this kind of, well, I'm irreplaceable. You won't find another me. And there is a sense in which that's true. That person is irreplaceable. But there's another sense in which there's another person there who may be able to be substituted for that person and serve those functions. I mean, I think, and again, I'm not a big follower of sports, but I do, I was from Wisconsin, and, I think when Brett Favre kind of stepped down and Aaron Rodgers stepped up, I mean, people forgot about Favre quicker than I think Favre would have imagined they would have. And they just went, okay, well, Rodgers is here now. And I think that's a bitter pill for people. It is. It's painful to think of ourselves as just substitutable. But there are so many ways in which we're not. So let's before I get into this ways that we're not, let's go. I want to really focus back on and maybe this tension here. Think about friendships, just as an example. Like we have a concept of friendship just in the abstract general. But I think if each of us is honest with ourselves, every one of your friendships is unique. It's so fascinating that, you could be really good friends with one person. You're kind of good friends with another person. And then this other person, well, you used to be friends, but you're not as good of friends, or you were kind of like work friends. And then even there, you have a friend, and then you have your friend's friend who you kind of hang out with when they're together, but the person is not really your friend. We're not just substitute. You don't call up your friend and you want to share a piece of news with your friend and they're not there. You don't just call up anyone else and say, okay, I'll just tell you then. There's a sense in which you want to share a particular piece of information with a particular person. And there's a sense in which, I think Facebook leads to this kind of sense of substitutability. People just post a comment to all of their friends equally. I remember, a student one time was talking about some of this in class and was saying how family members were upset because someone had announced a pregnancy on Facebook without telling their family first. And the person was like, well, no, I just made the announcement. And the people were like, no, your family's more important. We get the information first. And there was this tension here, again, between the kind of substitutability and the non-substitutability, the non-interchangeability. I mean, all English speakers, as speakers of English, are to that degree substitutable with other speakers of English. That is, anyone who produces an utterance in English that's intelligible, it could be produced by someone else, and it could be understood by someone who speaks English. And yet, each speaker speaks the language in a unique way. We all have a brain, we all have a stomach, but each person's brain and each person's stomach is like a fingerprint. They're unique in size and in shape and configuration. I mean, certainly we can talk about regular places where we can identify certain parts of the brain, where the occipital lobe is, where the frontal lobes, where the neocortex is. We can do all this kind of stuff. And yet the particular firing patterns that have gone on over the individual's lifetime have led to a very particular kind of wiring in there, right? More or less dense, more or less interconnectivity at certain parts. Take your parents. If you have siblings, it's kind of interesting. We have the sense of, you're all children of those parents, and to that extent, you're their children, and you're sort of like a group, and you're sort of substitutable there in some abstract sense. But in another sense, it's just absolutely not interchangeable. That you have a different relationship with your parents than your siblings do, and your parents may like you or your siblings more than the others, right? I mean, there's this particular relationship there where the kind of parenting that went on for one child is not the same as went on with another child. Although parenting is happening, again, in some abstract, substitutable way, we can learn about what do you do as a parent. You could say, wow, this child needs this kind of parenting, and this child, needs a different kind of parenting. Kind of fascinating. I saw a thing I heard a thing on NPR. And again, we do that. We say, well, I saw something, I heard something, I was exposed to something, and we sort of just substitute expressions. And even though they have a little bit different meaning, because we sort of have a gist of what we mean, a sense of it. But I heard that they were talking about stand-in for lines. So like people in New York who would be stand-ins for long queues or for long lines. Somebody wants to get a Broadway show and they don't want to stand all day in line to get the ticket. You can pay a person to stand in line for you. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, instead of you as an individual having to stand in line, you just pay someone to serve that function. And it's quite a controversial thing, especially as it happened now with COVID testing. This guy was talking about his business and how it took a hit in New York after COVID, but then he found a new niche in the market, and it had to do with helping people get access to, again, COVID tests without them having to do all the labor of standing in line. They would just, take somebody's cell phone number, stand in line, and when finally they were ready, they'd call a person and say, okay, I'm almost here. Come and grab your spot. There are obvious senses in which there's a lot that other people can't do for us, and that there's a lot of ways in which we're radically not substitutable. I think Heidegger really cuts at this in, just robust ways when he just goes to death. No one else can die for you. No one else can die for you, right? People can't go to the bathroom for you. Like say you need some groceries, they might be able to go to the store and get the groceries for you, but can they go to the bathroom for you? No, you have to go to the bathroom. Now, can they help you to the bathroom? Sure. Can another person die for you? No, that's one that you're going to have to be absolutely asymmetrically non-substitutable with any other person. And I think this is part of the sense that we have, that each one of us is an irreplaceable, non-substitutable gravitational center through which the entire world is being configured in certain kinds of relations. Um, I think, money certainly plays a huge role in all of this. That money, it conditions us to think about everything having a price, and things that aren't equal being able to be set to a set of equivalencies, being how much are those two items worth. So again, we can compare apples to oranges, and we say, well, how much do those different fruits cost? Right. So we find some higher plane for the exchange ability and the substitutability of things values. And there is a sense, right? I go to the store and I look and I want some apples, and I look and I see there's an apple and I grab it. Oh, and it's bruised and it's kind of browning. And I look and I grab a different apple. Yeah. So, I mean, the apples are sort of substitutable. But then, there's a sense in which, well, it's not a Fuji, or I want a Granny Smith, or I want a particular apple. I don't want a Macintosh, I want a Honey Crisp. And so we have the sense of, well, categorically, I want a Honey Crisp. And they say, well, this particular Honey Crisp is a little mealy. This one isn't as good as the last one. And so again, we were always back and forth with this tension of, get me one of those, a similar substitutable ones to serve some function or to appease some desire, and the way in which one thing is just not substitutable for another. I think we see this when you go to a music performance. Maybe you're going to go see a live band, you're going to go to an opera, and suddenly the main singer is out and they have the stand-in going to come in and do it. And you might go, wow, they did a really good job. Or you go, wow, it's just not the same with that person standing in, when Ronnie James Dio took over for Ozzy, right? I mean, it's a different band there, right? You got a different band going on. Is that right? Were they part of, is that Black Sabbath? I can't even remember anymore. So again, my memory is bad here, and that's part of the substitution, right? We think about things very abstractly. But going back to the money thing, it's sort of fascinating. Kenneth Burke does a lot of really interesting stuff on how money and the system of substitution and exchange that money cultivates. For him, he says, this is what paves the notion of Christ on the cross dying as a redemption for original sin. And so try to think about that for a second. So, I mean, this whole logic is fascinatingly embedded in the Bible, right? You have Adam and Eve, they're in the garden, and, they eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or the knowledge of opposites. And suddenly their eyes become uncovered, and they're aware that they're naked, and they feel shame and embarrassment, and they hide, all this kind of stuff. And again, it's known as original sin. And then God says, well, I'm going to punish you and all humanity for all of time. And it's sort of, it's a metaphorical rendering of, what happened to this organism in its odyssey towards self-consciousness. But the notion that some person could be punished for the wrongdoing of another, it's really fascinating. The notion of justice is really fascinating. Like if you go to the Hammurabi Code or some of these other forms that are pre-Bible, it's so interesting. A carpenter builds a building, and then the person who buys the building, his son is killed from the poor workmanship because the building collapses. The justice in this case is to go kill the son of the carpenter. And I think we go, what? No, the carpenter is to blame. We say, well, no, the person who bought the house, their son was killed by the house, so the carpenter's son must be put to death. And I think we go, whoa, that's a weird sort of substitution. But yeah, it's sort of odd when you think about it. The forms of substitutability that have been, I guess, ushered in since money. Somebody commits some crime, and then they can either pay some money or they can go to jail for a certain amount of time. And somehow jail time is seen to be somehow substitutable with money. Now, it obviously isn't. That's why people are willing to pay great amounts to get out early or to post bail. Right? There's a lot of different ways in which we could talk about equivalencies, and yet somehow they're being evaluated in this non-interchangeable way. But again, if you go back to this notion of Jesus dying on the cross for the sins of Adam and Eve, I mean, it's really fascinating. So not only are in the story anyway, does it make sense to these earlier peoples that someone could be punished for the wrongdoing of another, but they also have this notion of that Christ in dying, in being made human and dying for, quotes, the sins of humanity, is able to take away the wrongdoings of others or to make amends, to sort of, by his sacrifice, wipe the slate clean or something like this. Try to think about try to think about all the ways in which people are non-substitutable. We can talk about things being non-substitutable. You have your favorite pen, and maybe it was a uniquely made pen, and you lose the pen, and well, you try to get another one, and it's just not the same. And so, I mean, there's that sense. You have a particular chair, a particular, whatever, a pair of roller skates, a glove. There's something, that you just had a perfect one that was a perfect fit and everything was right, and then you can't find another one that's just like that. Even though categorically you could try to get another one. You have a dog, and you love your dog, and when that dog dies, when that dog is gone, you can't just go get another one. Now you can go get another dog, but there will be a sense in which that particular dog, that particular relationship was just non-interchangeable, just totally non-substitutable. You come home and you snuggle into bed, and instead of your spouse being in bed, there is, for some unknown reason, a total stranger in your bed. You don't just proceed and go, well, I was going to express affection with my loved one, but I guess seeing as how you're here, I'll just do that now with you. No, the exact same acts that are a celebration of a relationship when performed by the rightly related people, they become a violation when performed by the wrongly related. That people are not substitutable. So, we see you with your significant other, and your significant other comes over and gives you a little pat on the butt and gives you a kiss. We don't go, ooh, I see you like butt patting and kissing. Come up and I'll have a whack at you. No, it's somehow like, no, that would be inappropriate. But yeah, there's a great line. If you can't be a different person with different people, all those people will be the same person. Yeah, what makes people who they are is who you are when you're with them. There is this sense in which, and relationships, as much as we can talk about relationships in the abstract and say, well, are you in a relationship or not? Every relationship has dimensions that are unique and non-interchangeable. They're just non-substitutable. You won't just find another one. You can end a relationship and get in another relationship, but there will be senses in which it will just never, ever be exactly like the other relationship was. I mean, we're not even substitutable with ourselves over time. It's sort of like the Heraclitus, the statement, you can't step in the same river twice. Well, there couldn't even be a you who is the same you stepping through the river. I mean, if everything is changed, you're not even stepping through a river once. There isn't even a you there, nor is there the river. There's just change. And yet, we use a word, change. We try to think about it in terms of substitutability. I guess, the long short of it is that there are lots of ways in which each one of us, we're substitutable. And it's a painful thought that we're replaceable, that the world can go on without us, that there are certain kinds of relations where we feel so much like, we're important and we're the one who makes all this happen. And it's very real. There are other senses in which, when we die, when certain relationships end, when we change careers, there will be someone else to take our place and life will roll on and things go on. And I think the task is to not fall into well, I guess we're all just nothing but substitutable then. There is a sense in which we are. Clothing is made for anyone who wears this size of clothing. It doesn't have to be just me. This isn't just my clothing. The desk that I'm sitting in right now, it easily could be occupied by someone else. And if I would die and leave it, and somebody could pick it up at a Goodwill and they could have the desk. But there are so many ways in which each one of us, no matter how substitutable, in some ways, is absolutely fundamentally non-interchangeable in other ways. Yeah, there are certain aspects of you that are irreplaceable. It's you and only you. There's never been another you. There will never be another you. There is not another you out there. There are some things in this world that if you yourself do not say them, they will never be said. Thank you.